and the whole town or towns devastated economically, and children drop out of the university or college, and thousands are people left without a job. And yet the top people can gain maybe $800 million over 4 years. Well, no wonder some of us have trouble sleeping at night. But we read in John chapter 1, is there any hope? And in John, the Gospel chapter 1, it says to us, the Word, meaning Jesus Christ, the living Word, He became flesh and He lived among us. In other words, Jesus moved into the neighborhood of the world, and He came to this world. Now God is here, and we want to say this, where God is, there is hope. Hope, and we have to have hope. And where God is, there is hope. Now, in Mark 1:41, you'll notice, as you turn and you have it open to Mark chapter 1, verse 41. He said this, that in 1:41, 40 through 45, that He is able and willing. And one point is this, that this man with leprosy knew Jesus was able to heal him. He knew that Jesus was able to heal him. In verse 40, you'll notice, a man with leprosy came to Him and begged Him on his knees, if you are willing, you can make me clean. He knew Jesus could heal him. Well, do you know, when we think in these terms, how did He know that? He may have seen Jesus heal another person with leprosy, or a number of people. For Jesus cast out demons. Jesus was the one who stilled the storms. And He restored sight to the blind. Can you imagine that with blind Bartimaeus? And He comes along and He heals Bartimaeus. And he can see physically now. Wow. It's amazing what He can do for us. Listen to one man, he said, I wonder if many of us understand that Jesus Christ is able. Too often we have made our God out to be a small God. And he said, a God who's captive to His own creation, because science and technology march onward. But do we allow God to see God for who He really is? You see, it's not that people don't believe in God, he said. It's that they feel like they don't have much need of Him. I mean, modern medicine. And so we have modern medicine to deal with physical disease. And we have the supermarket to provide our daily bread. Unless we have something like a fatal illness, we say, well, we really don't need to call on God that much. Well, I think of the man by the name of Nietzsche, philosopher and a poet and a critic, and he had a concept called the last man. And the man, he was lulled by too much comfort and affluence, and he becomes apathetic. He becomes dulled to the world around him. The man has no compassion. He has no passion. And he rejects religion. And he rejects anything about the transcendent ideals about life. And any causes larger than his own self-interest. And so how he pictures the last man is, he's sitting in his lawn chair. All right, we can look at that. He sits in his lawn chair, his easy chair, and he just watches the world go by. And that's the last man, according to Nietzsche. I ask you today, have you lost your fervor and zeal you once had for God? It's not difficult to lose. The fervor and the zeal you once had for God. Do you know a sense of God's presence in your daily life? Well, first of all, that man, in the outline you can see, that man with leprosy, he knew that Jesus could heal. But secondly, you'll notice the point in the outline, this man with leprosy wanted to know if Jesus was willing to heal him. He knew Jesus could heal, but he wanted to know if Jesus was willing to heal him. Well, in the last part of verse 40, if you're willing, you can make me clean. If you are willing. Sure, Jesus was able to do it. But did he really care about the man's leprosy? Well, would Jesus care for him? You know, many others had great needs. Would he care for him? I read once where a man, well, in fact, it was in A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And he tells about two different men by the last names of Darnay and Carton. And Darnay was sentenced to death. Carton became his friend. Charles Darnay was sentenced to death. Sidney Carton became his friend and would visit him. He was going to die by the guillotine. What's by the guillotine? Is that the neck cut? Cut off the neck. He's going to die that way. Well, in the course of the deal, Carton decided, I'm going to take his place. And somehow he was able to get into the prison and get Darnay out, and Carton took his place. And they got ready to execute him. And a frightened young woman looks into his face, and she recognizes that he is not Darnay. And she asks him, are you dying for Darnay? And he said, I'm dying for Darnay. I'm dying for his wife. And I'm dying for his children. That's what I'm doing. And he climbed those stairs, and he died thinking this: It is a far, far better thing I do than I've ever done before. I'm willing to do it. And Jesus came with this man with leprosy, and there's a question here. Is it possible for one person to care that much for another? Is it really possible for one person to care that much that he would sacrifice his life and die for another person? Yes, it is. You see, Sidney Carton laid down his life for someone he knew he was innocent. But he was in prison. He's going to face the guillotine. He said, I will die in his place. On the other hand, when Jesus went to the cross at Calvary, when he went to that rugged cross on our behalf, he knew that we were not innocent. He knew we were guilty. And he did it anyway. Well, look in verse 41. It says the first three words, he was filled with compassion. Jesus reached out his hand and he touched the man and he said, I am willing, be clean. Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. Now let me ask you a question today. What touch do you personally need from Jesus today? All of us, myself included, we are all needy people. We have our frustrations and our anxieties and our fears and our hurt and our pain and our concerns, and we need a touch from Him. Well, I've read about leprosy, and when the Jewish leaders declared people with leprosy as unclean, because they would be coming closer and they'd yell out, unclean, unclean. In other words, stay away from them. If you touch a person with leprosy, you'll have it too. You'll have it also. In fact, I've noticed these beautiful stained glass windows, and I marvel at them every time I come in here, I think, to worship. But I understand that in some places, like the lower place there before the in memory of, and if you were standing outside in some buildings, the lepers would be outside, and they would be looking in. They wouldn't allow them to come into this place to worship today. Well, Jesus touched this man. He touched him. He had leprosy. He was healed. Someone said the real value of a person, the real value of the person is not outside. The real value of a person is inside. Inside. No person is too disgusting for God's touch. No person is. And someone said, when you feel repulsed by someone, stop and remember how God feels about that person.